Good evening to our members and guests, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar. My name is Emma Davidson, and I'm the president of the Oxford and Cambridge Society in Malaysia. I think it is fair to say that this is our most keenly awaited webinar since we began them in April 2020. We value all of our webinars, but no other one, it can be said, quite literally, is so fundamentally about life and death, with perhaps the exception of the one that we did with Professor William James of Oxford University about the Astrazeneca Oxford vaccine. No one needs me to introduce this topic and to recap how dire things are and how much we need this vaccine to be rolled out quickly and effectively. So I'm going to jump straight in by introducing your moderators for this evening. Firstly, we have Dr. Jerry Bodecker, an Australian whose doctoral studies were at Harvard, and he's held research and teaching appointments in the Division of Medical Sciences at the University of Oxford for 2 decades, and is a member of Oxford's Green Templeton College. An adjunct professor of epidemiology at Columbia University, New York, and in integrative medicine at the University of Western Sydney, Dr. Jerry has worked with a number of UN agencies, including the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and the UN Development Programme, and is currently working with the Asian Development Bank on a book and policy frameworks for wellness in Asia. He's worked with the Qatar Foundation on Cultural Traditions of Wellness in the Islamic World and chairs the Mental Wellness Initiative of the Global Wellness Institute. He is a fellow of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry and is also Vice President Oxford at the Oxford and Cambridge Society in Malaysia. Faisal Arif is the secretary of the Oxford and Cambridge Society of Malaysia, and he runs Border Pass, an award-winning company that gets visitors through the airport immigration in seconds when we're allowed to travel. He studied law at Cambridge University and Columbia, where he was a Fulbright scholar. A true Cambridge loyalist, he is appalled by the fact that the Oxford vaccine may have just saved his life. And finally, to our special guest this evening, who is surely the man everyone is looking to get us out of this mess. YB Khairy Jamaluddin is Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation in the Malaysian federal government. He previously served as Minister of Youth and Sports from 2013 to 2018. He's been the Member of Parliament for Rembau since 2008. YB Khairy has been appointed as the Coordinating Minister for Malaysia's COVID-19 vaccination programme. Together with the Health Minister, he co-chairs the COVID-19 Vaccine Supply Access Guarantee Special Committee. Outside of politics, he's worked as a policy aide, investment banker and entrepreneur. He was chairman of Malaysia's National Entrepreneur Development Corporation, deputy president of the Football Association of Malaysia, and commander of the 508 Territorial Army Unit Regiment of Malaysia. A proponent of centrist politics, he's the co-founder of the Centre, a think tank dedicated to the promotion of centrist thought. He was educated at Oxford and at University College London. So welcome to YB Khairy Jamaluddin. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really happy to see you here.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, over to you, Faisal and Jerry.
Right, I think KJ would like to present something just off the top. Would we like to jump into that straight away?
Yeah, sure. First of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Oxford and Cambridge Alumni Network for inviting me for this webinar. I understand that there's a great deal of interest in vaccinations, both around the world as well as here in Malaysia. So I prepared a quick deck for the ease of the discussion, as well as to update everyone here on where we are right now in Malaysia and how things are set to unfold over the next couple of months or so. So if we can share the deck, please. Thank you. Next. So I think everybody knows this, roughly. This is the program overview in Malaysia. It's a voluntary basis. It's not compulsory yet. It is free for Malaysians and non-Malaysians residing in the country. At the moment, the vaccination age band is 18 and above, but recently the Drug Control Authority on the 15th of June has approved the use of the Pfizer vaccine for those aged 12 and above, and we'll be announcing the plans for phase 5, which is for teenagers soon. We're targeting 80% of the population, and we want to get this done obviously before the end of this year, but we are accelerating the timeline faster so that we can cross 80% as quickly as possible. Like many other countries, we've rolled it out in phases. The first phase for frontliners, both health and non-health frontliners, essential workers. We are currently in the second phase in most states, and that's covering the elderly, those above 60-year-olds, those who have comorbidities, and also the disabled community. The third phase is for the general population, and we have a fourth phase, which is ongoing, and that's outbreak management. So that targets vaccinations for sectors which are seeing clusters of infection, and I'll touch a bit on that later. And those were the indicative targets of the phases, and we use all sorts of facilities, government healthcare facilities, stadiums, halls, public facilities, GP clinics, outreach programs through buses, trucks, etc., etc. Next. So the objective, of course, is broadly speaking, one is to protect the frontliners initially so that there was no collapse of the healthcare system. Secondly, was to protect the high-risk groups from death. We know that COVID mortalities are high amongst people who are older and those people who have comorbidities, although we've seen through the B16172 variant that that mortality profile is changing now. 3 is to try to immunize as widely as possible. Now, we'll get later into the debate about this term herd immunity. I've stopped using that term. Some of the other leaders are still using the term herd immunity. I've advised the Prime Minister to be careful to use the term herd immunity, simply because my view as the coordinating minister looking at the data and the science is that this very well may be endemic, and we may see COVID in a less threatening form, but it will stay with us for quite some time. And a fourth, of course, is the outbreak management that I spoke of earlier. Next. Now, these are some of the critical milestones that that we've achieved. So on the 24th of February, the Prime Minister got the first vaccination. And yesterday was a crucial milestone where we breached 200,000 doses a day, which I targeted for July. Sorry, that should be 15th of June, not 15th of May. That was yesterday that we breached 200,000 doses a day. I think if there are any key learnings from Malaysia's immunization plan, and perhaps a misstep that I made, was we opened up registration on the 23rd of February to everyone. And because we did that, obviously a lot of people registered on the 23rd of February, including young people. And although we communicated the phases saying that, look, if you're under 60 and healthy, you probably will only be getting your appointment sometime in August or September. Well, that was clearly articulated. Now, of course, the sense among the public is that I registered on the 23rd of February. Why have I not received my appointment yet? In some countries like the UK and Singapore, they open up registration based on age bands, 60s, 50s, 40s onwards. So I think in terms of managing expectations, I may have made an error there. Next. So this is the portfolio of our vaccine. Malaysia, like many other countries, relies on a portfolio of vaccines, a multi-pronged approach, because you have to remember that a lot of these negotiations started last year, before there were any interim clinical data of the vaccines in terms of its safety, in terms of its efficacy. We didn't want to put all our eggs in one basket, so we had a multi-pronged strategy, discussing with different vaccine manufacturers, looking at the different platforms. We were interested in the mRNA platform, obviously, but it was never used. Obviously, the more traditional inactivated platform that comes out of China, and also the viral vector that was developed by Oxford. In the end, we decided to create a basket or portfolio of vaccines where first we signed up for COVAX for 10% of our population. And through COVAX, we've already received some of our AstraZeneca deliveries. And the other common misperception that people have is that we received the entirety of our 73 million doses already. And why is the government not vaccinating people? The reality is that we receive these supplies on a weekly basis, and it comes gradually over the next few months. We decided on Pfizer, a big order for Pfizer. So bulk of our portfolio is Pfizer, 70%. And that was, I made that decision because of Pfizer's speed in starting clinical trials amongst teenagers and now children. So I thought that Pfizer would cross the line first as far as pediatric and also teenage vaccinations are concerned. So we decided to go big on our Pfizer order. AstraZeneca, apart from our AstraZeneca order through COVAX, we have a direct order for AstraZeneca. And we have the Sinovac order, which is the inactivated virus vaccine from China. And this we buy finished from China, as well as a fill finish line here in Malaysia, where we want to increase the capacity of our manufacturing in the future. We also have an order for CanSino, which we approved yesterday. And this is adenovirus 5 viral vector vaccine. That is a single shot vaccine. So we'll be using this in the interior areas where it's difficult to access people for 2 doses. We also have a Johnson & Johnson request through COVAX and a Novavax request through COVAX as well. And we've also concluded an order with the Russian Development Fund and the Gamaleya Institute for the Sputnik V vaccine for 10% of our population. And that's a viral vector vaccine which uses 2 different adenovirus and is quite efficacious. Next. Sorry, this is a bit of a busy slide, but when the third wave of the COVID infections happened in Malaysia, I was instructed by Cabinet and the Prime Minister to accelerate the vaccination exercise. That means rather than spacing things out and finishing things in December, to try to achieve the targets as quickly as possible. So what I had to do was to try to renegotiate some of the shipping or the delivery schedule. We managed to do that, and now Pfizer has committed 25 million doses in the 3rd quarter of this year, and that will certainly ramp up the vaccination drive. We've also renegotiated our Sinovac delivery, so we'll get the entirety of our 12 million doses by the end of July. And also we're working together with AstraZeneca to ensure that the problems that we're seeing in Thailand, the Thai facility where we get our order from, is overcome. However, we've lost the slide there. Can we get the slide back? Y'all see there? Okay. So let me just continue. Okay, there we are. So on the left is the issue of supply. But as we know, vaccines don't save lives. Vaccinations do. It's no point buying vaccines, but you need to vaccinate people as quickly as possible. So we looked at how we can ramp up daily capacity to 200,000 a day, which we hit yesterday. And that's simply through opening up more vaccination centers, both big ones as well as small ones. So we have mega PPVs for the benefit of our panel members from the UK. PPVs are Pusat Pemberian Vaccine or vaccination centers. That's our abbreviation here in Malaysia. So we opened up all sorts of PPVs. We opened up mega PPVs in stadiums, in convention centers, and halls. And these are our workhorses. This can do about 5 to 10,000 doses a day. But of course, it's not just about that. It's your smaller PPVs in small towns. It's your GP clinics. So by the end of this month, we'll have 1,000 GP clinics and additional to that, another 150 private hospitals also giving vaccines. We've also allowed for retired nurses to come back into service. We've allowed for graduates who are waiting for their housemanship and postgraduates, and also those who are in their clinical years to join and become vaccinators at our vaccination center. And we've gone also big on mobile vaccination exercises. There is a misconception out there saying that, why do we have to register MySejahtera? But for people working out in the field in the States, we've lifted this requirement. So essentially what we're doing is we're sending people out, vaccinators into the villages. And of course, the villages, they don't have the application, they don't have the app that we use. They simply vaccinate them and upload their details into the system later. So we've lifted all these requirements to make it as easy as possible for people to be vaccinated. Next. So this is just a story of where we are, and I'm not presenting the slide by way of an excuse of where we are in terms of our vaccination. Now, this is our World in Data, which is a repository that's run by Oxford. This is the share of people who've received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. As you can see, benchmarked against our neighbors, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and I'm taking our bigger neighbors there because I don't run a country which is the size of a postage stamp. So you see that Malaysia is doing pretty well. Even compared against a country like Japan, we are slowly creeping up towards Japan. So if you look at an Asian comparison, Malaysia is doing relatively well. But the reason I want to show this slide is because in the next slide, which I want to show you, that's really the story of vaccine inequity. The first slide is the countries at the bottom there. And the countries at the top are the countries that hoarded vaccines. So Canada bought enough vaccines for 5 times their population over. The United Kingdom, United States, European Union, similar story there. So this is a story about vaccine inequity, where it's not the capacity of vaccination that we cannot ramp up, but rather it's the supply. So you look at a country like Japan, it's also all the way down there, although it's a first world country. So this is really a story about vaccine inequity. It's a bigger story that we need, a bigger issue that we need to discuss after this pandemic is over, about intellectual property, about the sharing of patents, about opening up patents, and about ensuring a more fair distribution of vaccines in a pandemic or in a crisis. And I think the other thing to note is that now some of these countries have started to reach out. So Japan has announced a donation to Malaysia today. We'll be exchanging notes with Japan and revealing the sum, the volume soon. We also announced a donation from China today, and we'll be announcing a donation from the United States soon. So there are attempts now by these countries to rectify this horrible inequity, but that this is the reality of the situation. Next. So we have registered 59% of the population, 60% of the population. And I have to tell you that a lot of the registration happened over the last 1 or 2 months when the third wave hit us. At that point, a lot of people decided to register. So I think right now the problem is not so much vaccine hesitancy, rather it's ensuring that those people who haven't got their appointments yet get their appointments very quickly. We've pushed out 5.1 million appointments. We've given out 4.9 million vaccines, first dose 3.5 million, second dose 1.4. More than 700,000 frontliners have been inoculated. Some have yet to do so, and that's still ongoing. 1.4 million elderly have at least gotten one dose, and from the disabled community, about 12,000 plus. And you can see that ever since May, there's this accelerated growth in terms of our vaccination capacity. And that's simply because the supply started to arrive. Once the supply started to arrive, we were able to increase our vaccination capacity. Next. Now, this is a projection for the next few months. That red dotted line at the top is your target, the target that we want to reach. Right now, we feel that we can get to quite a decent coverage. So I'm estimating about a 40% coverage of people who are fully vaccinated with 2 doses by the end of August or by early September. And that corresponds to the recovery plan that was announced by the Prime Minister. Now it drops after August because a lot of states would have finished by then. So we're targeting the big states like KL, Selangor, if we can get our capacity up to be done by August or September, and we'll mop up the rest in September, October onwards. Next. This shows how we can get 200,000 right now. We are operating 714 vaccination centers across the country, which include public PPVs that are run by the Ministry of Health, public PPVs that are run by private practitioners, mega scale PPVs, special PPVs for the Astrazeneca opt-in program, PPVs at universities, drive-through PPVs, PPVs at GP clinics, and PPVs at private hospitals. So I go through this data on a granular version of this data on a daily basis to ensure that every single PPV is meeting its KPI. And if not, we drill down on a daily basis to see why a particular PPV, if it's been allocated 1,000 appointments, only did 800, for instance. So that's a daily chore that we do. Next. So these are the vaccination targets for the states. As I said earlier, Selangor, Sarawak, Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya, Labuan. We hope to finish by August, and the other states finish after that. Penang, we hope to finish in October, and we hope to finish the others in December. And Sarawak, I must say, has a fantastic vaccination rate. It's the fastest in the country, simply because legally, if the state of emergency ends on the 1st of August, Sarawak has to have their elections within 60 days. So they're vaccinating people like crazy there because they want to ensure that it doesn't end up becoming like a Sabah state election where it results in another wave. This is my last slide. Next. This is a picture report. What is Malaysia without a picture report? So these are the different types of vaccination centers. You have your mega centers, government clinics. We have trucks and buses that have been retrofitted into becoming vaccination centers. We have rural outreach. We literally have nurses going on small boats upriver for 2-3 hours, finding these small villages and vaccinating them. And of course, we started our first drive-through for the disabled community today. I think it's the first dedicated drive-through vaccination center for the disabled community, perhaps in Asia, maybe even in the world. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for that presentation, Khairy, and congratulations to you and the National Immunization Program for hitting the 200,000 mark. That said, I think something like about 13% of the population has been vaccinated. There's still quite a long way for us to go. And I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned in your presentation about vaccinations not being compulsory yet. Once supply is no longer an issue, do you think there is an argument to make it compulsory for eligible adults?
That becomes both a public health and an ethical question that the cabinet will have to decide on. One, we have to understand, okay, a lot of countries have started to plateau in terms of their vaccination. So in the United States, you're starting to see a plateau. Those who want to be vaccinated, those who don't want to be vaccinated cannot be convinced to be vaccinated. Now, at that point, you have to look at two things. One, you have to look at what vaccinations serve. Vaccinations serve to prevent the more serious outcomes of COVID and the collapse of the healthcare system. Now, if vaccinations can reduce hospitalizations, intensive care, deaths, and to some extent transmission by the time you get to about 70% of your target, then making it mandatory will have some ethical repercussions on those people who do not want to receive the vaccination. The other way to look at it, mandatory is of course the stick, but we've been thinking about a lot of carrot policy options as well. And some countries have been implementing this. Now, what are the carrot options that we have? Is to give certain freedoms to people who have been fully vaccinated. You can freely travel, you can attend concerts, you can go to indoor gatherings, you can go to conventions. And of course, this is without taking into consideration foreign travel. People who want to travel overseas will most likely have to be vaccinated. So that's when you'll start seeing those who are reluctant or hesitant to become to being vaccinated will inevitably have to be vaccinated. And I don't mean this in a condescending manner, but there is some vaccine hesitancy in the Muslim community here in Malaysia. But once they know that it's mandatory for you to be vaccinated, for you to go to Mecca for your pilgrimage, I'm sure they will agree to be vaccinated. So before getting to the hard stick of having a mandatory vaccination policy, which we don't have in Malaysia, we don't even have the mandatory vaccination policy for regular vaccination because there are ethical considerations there. I think we need to explore the carrot, the benefits that you get or the freedoms that you enjoy once you've been fully vaccinated.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to pick up on a point that you made in your presentation, which was the questioning about the concept of herd immunity. I think you're very correct to back away from that as a national goal. It's being questioned in many countries. One of the things we know is that when people are vaccinated, they can still get COVID. Doesn't matter what the vaccine is. And They may not be ill enough to be hospitalized, but they can certainly spread it. So vaccination isn't the whole picture. And in fact, from a public health sense, we've probably become a bit distracted by vaccination in that we're not looking at cure. And treatments have to come as part of this equation. I understand you're not the Ministry of Health, so you can't speak for the ministry, but from a national perspective, with Pfizer expecting to introduce a treatment, a drug that can eliminate COVID-19 within 5 to 6 days, launching this in November, others in pipeline, and also home testing kits for shortening the detection time. There's a bigger package that needs to be looked at to move towards, if not herd immunity, at least faster response time treatment, making it less dangerous. And I just wondered if you could give us a national perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. I agree with you, and I think that the focus on vaccinations, while crucial, may actually be slightly misleading, because I do believe that it's one arsenal, one tool in an arsenal of measures that you actually require. First of all, I think I would err on the side of caution when we would end non-pharmaceutical interventions like wearing masks and ensuring physical distancing and overcrowding. I think some countries may have done it too early, especially with B16172 variant, which is far more transmissible than the original version of the virus. So I think as far as Malaysia's public health consideration goes, we are very conservative and careful when removing non-pharmaceutical interventions for the public here in Malaysia. At the same time, we've been making a lot of inroads into looking at test kits. What the world will look like, or what Malaysia will look like, I think in 2022, is a mixture of people who have been fully vaccinated, as well as rapid test kits that can be used on a daily basis. And I think we need to introduce that as part of your life. Just like taking your temperature, doing a quick saliva test. We're talking to Singapore, trying to see how we can work together with them. They've developed this breathalyzer test. Whatever allows you to test quicker, faster and cheaper than the RT-PCR gold standard is something that's crucial, because as I said, and as you said, I believe that it's possible that this virus will be endemic, and we'll have to manage it and mitigate it going forward. We are also, because of our now strong relationship with pharmaceuticals like Pfizer, we are looking at their clinical data and trials for what we termed as treatments. So we'll be looking at that as well, because that's also something required in the arsenal. By the way, Malaysia's mortality rate from COVID is one of the lowest in the world. I think it's 0.5, 0.6, may have gone up to 0.6%. So whatever the frontliners are doing at the hospitals, I think it's working.
Thank you very much.
YB, there's something I'm sort of struggling with, because we often talk about vaccine hesitancy among the rakyat, and we are told not to be so picky, that the best vaccine is the one that we can get our hands on at that time. But at the same time, we see the NPRA really taking its time to study and approve vaccines. Moderna, Sputnik, they just approved J&J yesterday, and that's a year and a half almost after the US had approved it, right? And I imagine that this has all kinds of implications on the procurement of vaccines. So we've had folks like Tun Mahathir and Hisham and things like that recently calling on the government to just accept any vaccines that have already been approved abroad. There was something about doing things right versus doing the right things there. Why is the government itself so vaccine hesitant when it comes to approvals? And if it's down to silos and bureaucracy, why hasn't the iron fist of the emergency been used to speed up the process?
Well, I think there are serious consequences if you start interfering in pharmaceutical regulators, any regulator for that matter. And while I appreciate the need for a more expeditious process of approving vaccines, the moment you bypass the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency, a lot of legal questions arise. who will be liable in the case of adverse events following immunization? Who will be liable if the vaccines that have been delivered are not stable or have been found to be not effective or efficacious upon testing? So there are serious legal questions if you want to do away with the present process. Now, what we can do is to ask the NPRA to expedite things. So I think that message has been heard loud and clear. In the case of Johnson & Johnson and Sino, they took weeks, not months, to evaluate this once the dossier had come in. And there's another thing that I need to explain to the public here in terms of the registration of pharmaceutical products in Malaysia. There has to be a local product registration holder. There has to be a company here that's responsible for the product. So in the case of Pfizer and Astrazeneca, it was Pfizer Malaysia and Astrazeneca Malaysia. They have subsidiaries here. In the case of Sinovac, they don't have a subsidiary here, so they appointed a local pharmaceutical company, publicly listed, Pharmaniaga, to become their product registration holder. Moderna, there's no product registration holder. There's nobody that's come forward to say, I want to register Moderna. So we've been talking to people, pharmaceutical companies, and saying that, look, the public is blaming the government, but there's no private pharmaceutical company that wants to register. We can facilitate it. We can ask for the data from Moderna, from Sinopharm, from all these pharmaceutical companies, approve it, and it can be sold in the private market because the government's bought enough for our public program, but we can certainly open a private market. Secondly, we've also told NPRA, if there are vaccines that have received emergency use listing under the WHO, then the approval process shouldn't be long, and they've agreed. So, for instance, anybody wants to register Moderna, Sinopharm, those two vaccines are vaccines that have been listed under the EUL of WHO, then we will expedite that process.
I mean, YB, if I may, I seem to recall signing a waiver when I got my AZ shot. If it's a question of the law and having someone to sue, are you also saying that if you get a Pfizer shot, for example, and something goes wrong, you will have someone to sue? Is that the situation we're looking at?
No, not so much the AFI, because you've given a waiver for the adverse events for yourself. But this is more in terms of the quality of the vaccine. When the vaccine comes in, if it's not properly registered with a local product registration holder, when the vaccine arrives and the NPRA, they do a lot release inspection. Basically, they open a few vaccines and they test the potency of the vaccine and say that what's arrived is not the vaccine, but it's fake. It's warm water or saline water, whatever it is. Then who's going to be responsible for that? That's what I meant.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying. Jerry?
Minister, thank you, Faisal. As I'm sure you're hearing loud and clear every day in the context of your very hard work to expand coverage, people are still feeling frustrated that they can't make an appointment, they've registered, and so on. This is, a lot of it is seen as based on fragmentation, different agencies responsible for different parts of the process. I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, to address this issue of fragmentation, but also one of the things that we're hearing from people is that they're looking at other countries and seeing that sports stadiums are being opened up, shopping malls, military facilities, and so on. And I'm just wondering, is there the possibility for people to just open up, or for these very large public facilities to be opened up, and for people to register when they turn up, and be compared against a database that shows they haven't been vaccinated? Are you thinking of something like that at all?
Yeah, thanks, Professor. I think a large part of the frustration right now is the long wait for your vaccine appointment. And I've been very clear and transparent with the vaccine delivery schedule. I have a press conference every week with the Minister of Health where I announce the amount of vaccines that we receive. And of course, it's a frustration that I share as well. I wish that we had more vaccines. So it's not so much that we can't give the appointments, it's that we can only give the appointments once I have sight of the delivery schedule. And now we're getting a more a stable and increased number of vaccines coming in, and you'll start seeing appointments ramp up over the next couple of months. In terms of the multiple ministries and agencies that are involved, we've decided from day one that this is a whole of government and whole of society approach. So I co-chair the committee with the Minister of Health, and we agreed very early on that other than vaccines, he's got to handle the pandemic. He's got to handle the pandemic situation. So for vaccines, operationally, I run the task force on behalf of the committee, which is jointly chaired by the health minister and myself. We talk to each other multiple times in the day. I WhatsApp him probably 100 times every hour. We're in constant communication, so there's no issue about lack of coordination between our two ministries as well as other ministers. In terms of facilities, yes, Professor, our national stadium has been converted into a vaccination center, the indoor stadium and now the car park of the national stadium. I wouldn't use the word ceased, but I've basically taken over all the convention centers in Kuala Lumpur already, and they're all vaccination centers. And I've told the convention centers, I said, look, you're not about to have a convention anytime soon. You might as well give your halls over to me. So that's happening. That's been happening already here in Malaysia.
Okay, thank you. And can people just turn up and say,
"Oh yeah, sorry."
I'm in.
Yeah. So on the issue of walk-in, so I think by the end of August, and well, maybe to give me a buffer, by sometime in the middle of September, once we clear those people who have already registered, pre-registered, that means people who are waiting for their appointments, and I think we can clear them hopefully by the end of August or late or early September, then we will introduce walk-ins. That means you just go, you show up and you walk in and you get registered, you get vaccinated. You don't need a registration anymore. But to be fair to those people who have registered, we need to give those appointments out first. Once that's done, then it's opened up and anybody can just turn up and get vaccinated.
Okay. Faisal, and Minister, I think we've got lots of questions. We've got over 600 people in the audience right now. So Faisal, if you've got a last question, then perhaps we should go to questions from the audience, the viewers.
Sure, yeah. It's really about the procurement and distribution model. If COVID does become endemic, how long can the government sustain and provide free vaccinations, or will we have to start transitioning over to private sector sort of vaccinations and distribution? And the follow-on question from that is really decentralizing federal procurement. Will states and private sector end up being sort of like competing against each other and bidding up prices when they don't have that collective bargaining power? And there are also ethical issues as well. We've word on the street that private clinics are now charging 500, 750 ringgit, depending on which vaccine you want. What is the thinking, the long-term thinking and strategy of the government there?
So I'll just address that question about some private clinics charging. So we've made several police reports because the private clinics have to give it free. They're part of the national program. So private GP clinics must give it for free. They cannot charge people. If you have heard of any cases of people offering vaccines for a price, other than, of course, the industrial program, which I can touch on later, then please report to CITF, to the task force, or make a police report. Now, Faisal, going forward, we've bought enough vaccines for 130% of our population. Yeah, so that means we have a buffer stock. We have a buffer stock that can essentially give boosters, perhaps to those who got vaccinated very early. But going forward, if the mutation continues to be aggressive and stubborn, and this ends up becoming endemic, then we have to have a strategy, much like we have flu shots in countries which administer flu shots. That's where the government has to sit down and decide on a procurement strategy. We cannot probably afford to do this a second time around. We spent about 3.5 billion ringgit on our vaccine procurement alone. That doesn't include the program itself of administering the vaccines. That's probably another 1.5 billion ringgit. So we'll have to probably look at subsidizing or providing it for free for B40, for M40. and also look at private orders for people who can afford it and open it up to the private sector. I suspect that vaccine prices will also drop as we see many, many more vaccines come into the market. We're just talking about a handful of vaccines that have been approved right now, but there are many, many more in development. And I think that this will cause the price of the vaccines to drop significantly. And I think when that happens, then the private sector can buy it, the private hospitals can buy it, state governments can buy it, and it's just a version of paracetamol, essentially.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you. So we're getting several themes of questions coming in, and there are people who are saying, well done for you and your team, and appreciation to the frontliners. I know I cried when I got my vaccine. I was so thankful. So yeah, they are doing an amazing job. So a lot of very positive things out there, but we're getting some certain groups of questions. There's a lot of questions about legal and illegal immigrants and foreigners, and how many of those are part of those registered in MySejahtera. What are we going to do to make sure that they get vaccinated as well? Okay, thanks, Emma. Just before I answer that, I forgot to round off the answers for Faisal just now. The other thing is, one thing that I need to explain is that unfortunately Malaysia doesn't have end-to-end vaccine manufacturing and development capacity. We don't have a factory at present that can manufacture the vaccine from formulation to fill finish. That's why we insisted on companies investing in fill finish. That's the most easy investment to make into vaccine production, and then from there you make investments throughout the supply chain. We are also working together with university in Thailand, looking at developing an mRNA version of the vaccine, not just for COVID, but for other infectious diseases as well, tropical infectious diseases. So this whole experience has taught me that we need to spend a lot more money in epidemic preparedness or pandemic preparedness going forward, because if there is another epidemic or pandemic, not if, when there is. I mean, I think that there is enough data out there to say that there are hundreds, if not hundreds and thousands of zoonotic viruses waiting to jump from the animal ecosystem to human beings. We need to be more nimble and self-sufficient. If I'm having to repeat this exercise and scramble to talk to Pfizer, get behind people in the queue, it's going to be bad for our country. So I think we really need to look at pandemic preparedness going forward. Now, coming to Emma's question just now, there's a bucket of questions on immigrants or migrants, the migrant population here in Malaysia. As many of the expats here know, we don't discriminate between foreigners and Malaysians. Appointments are issued according to phases. So if you were lucky enough to participate in the Astrazeneca opt-in program here in Malaysia, didn't matter if you were Malaysian or not, you were given your vaccinations, as well as the frontliners, doctors who come from other expatriates who are serving in the health sector, got their vaccines. Now, what do we do with expatriates who are working in the manufacturing sector, working in the construction sector? So we've just recently introduced a new vaccination program under phase 4, which is pandemic management. We noticed that now, for the benefit of Professor Jerry, we are in Malaysia now in a partial lockdown, but we allow for essential economic sectors to operate, those who are involved in the global supply chain, those who are involved in exports. So they have to work. They have to work at a certain capacity, 60%. And we've identified workplace clusters as new clusters of infection. So the public health advice to me was to start vaccinating people who are having to work during the lockdown to ensure that they are protected and their families are protected when they go back. So we started that today. And that covers quite a lot of foreign workers as well, or expatriates, Emma, because a lot of these factories employ expatriates. And we, again, make no distinction between them. So those expatriates and foreigners who are registered under the industry program will get their vaccination soon under the industrial vaccination program. Those who are registered under the normal program, as I said earlier, will be getting their vaccination appointments if they've registered over the next couple of months. Now, let's talk about the sensitive area of migrants who are undocumented, or migrants who are here who may have lapsed their visa and they are here illegally.
Now, as far as the Home Ministry is concerned, I've discussed with them, as long as these migrants have documents, we will vaccinate them and we will try to register them. Now, this is an ongoing discussion that I'm having with the Home Ministry and the Department of Immigration. I think you can appreciate that in many countries, the motivation of the immigration agency is very much different sometimes to public health. But again, this is, an internal discussion that I'm continuing to have with the Home Ministry, and that we can come to an agreement on how to approach those who are undocumented. We're going to work together with the United Nations agencies for undocumented for the refugee population here in Malaysia. There's a slightly under 200,000 refugee population here in Malaysia who have UNHCR cards. So we'll be working with the UN agencies to ensure that they're vaccinated as well. My biggest fear, of course, is that if we send the wrong public message to undocumented migrants, then they will simply hide and not come out for their vaccinations. And as a public health strategy, that's risky because you're not reaching out to people who are highly mobile because they are obviously out and about working and not being vaccinated. So again, we've had very robust discussions in Cabinet about this on how to ensure that we can vaccinate everyone, regardless of their immigration status, but also address the concerns that the Immigration Department has on undocumented migrants being here in Malaysia.
Great. Thank you for that. So there are lots of questions coming in from students, I suspect largely by KTJers, and they're basically worried about going overseas to university and they haven't had their vaccines. And if they get to a foreign country and they're not vaccinated, then they're going to have to quarantine. And that's a challenge for some of the B40s who are just being able to make it to university. Maybe they're sponsored. So is there a chance that some of these students could be vaccinated? And also the local students going to local universities as well, can they be vaccinated before term starts?
So, sorry, just another factoid for the last question. About 400,000 foreigners have registered under My Sejahtera, just to put it out there. So coming to students, we are already accepting applications through the website for students who want to go overseas. So we are expecting students who are studying in the UK to leave sometime in August or September. And likewise, students in going to the United States leaving sometime in August. We've approved quite a lot of requests already. As long as they can show proof of enrollment in a foreign university, we will provide them with appointments. So that's already ongoing, and we process that on a daily basis. Now, there is a I mean, in terms of pure transparency here. We don't give people the choice of vaccines because we give people the vaccine that's available. But that rule there's an exception to that rule, and that's precisely for people going abroad to study. Because if we give somebody a vaccine that's not recognized in the country of their university, that can lead to problems. So we always look at the destination for students. And for Malaysians who are going abroad to work as expatriates, and we try to match the vaccine with the vaccines that have been recognized in that particular country. Now, this is a policy question that the WHO needs to resolve. The WHO must insist that countries accept all vaccines that are listed by WHO. If we continue to only allow people to travel to countries and allow them to come in if they have been vaccinated by the vaccines used in that country, then you're going to create a situation of great inequity where a lot of people cannot travel to different countries and be exempt from quarantine restrictions. Of course, you can travel, but you might have to be quarantined for 2 to 3 weeks. So right now, for instance, I was vaccinated with the Sinovac vaccine from China. I was the first one to be vaccinated with Sinovac to give people the confidence that it was a good vaccine. But if I go to the EU, I'll have to be quarantined. If I go to China, I'll be received like a king. So, this is something that we need to resolve in going forward in the long term about ensuring that there is mutual recognition of vaccines around the world.
We've got an interesting question from Zhu Lin Chen. He says, I've heard that some PPVs in Penang will close on the 7th of July to observe the state holiday. Can you verify that?
Yeah, So I'm having a bit of a issue here, where some vaccination centers, some states are deciding to shut down for public holidays. And I've already issued a circular saying that the SARS-CoV-2 virus doesn't stop spreading on public holidays, and it's essential for us to keep vaccinating throughout. So that's an ongoing challenge, and we want to ensure that vaccination centers remain open even on public holidays. Whether or not Penang is closing on the 7th, I can't tell you for certain, but I know that some states have decided to close down for public holidays. The mega PPVs, the big PPVs that are operating, will not close down on public holidays. That's 7 days a week. We're concerned that the smaller PPVs or smaller vaccine centers are closing.
I want to share a question from Chung Yi. It's a little bit personal, but I think it demonstrates a lot of problems people have. My 82-year-old grandma registered for the vaccine months ago in Alistar. Till today, she hasn't received her appointment, and the emails are not answered. And I think that's a common complaint that people have, that it's really hard to get through to your helpline and to get replies to the emails.
Yeah, so we've done some enhancements to the hotline, so the abandonment rate is much less now. The case for elderlies who have not received their appointments, we've narrowed it down to a root cause, and that's because they have indicated that they have certain conditions which mean that they cannot be vaccinated at a normal vaccination center, that they need to be vaccinated in a hospital. And that's where the coordination needs to improve, where the hospitals need to pick up on these cases and send the appointments to these people who need to be vaccinated. So in the My Sejahtera, they would have ticked certain things, and there were certain conditions or comorbidities or conditions or contraindications that suggested that his mother could not be vaccinated in a normal vaccination center. And obviously the hospital has not gotten to her yet. But what my officers are on this call right now, we'll get the details and we'll solve the problem by tomorrow.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Stephen Tang says...
The conditions, sorry, just to expand on that, the conditions are normally if you're a cancer patient or you have a combination of comorbidities or you're immunosuppressed, we don't vaccinate them at normal vaccination centers. They have to do that at hospitals. So a lot of these people are falling through the cracks. We're trying to pick them up as much as possible.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm sure there are lots of these individual cases. So Stephen Tang asked, the Astrazeneca vaccine was reported only 10% effective against the Beta South African variant, which we have in Malaysia. Are there plans to give Pfizer as the second dose if you've had AstraZeneca as the first? So basically about mixing the vaccines.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. At last week's committee meeting, the technical working group that's chaired by Dr. Kalai, who is the director of the Institute for Clinical Research, presented a paper on heterologous vaccinations, which is essentially using two different vaccines to boost the efficacy against different variants. So we have some real-world data that we've received from Germany about heterologous vaccinations using the AZ for the first dose and the Pfizer for the second dose, which has been shown to boost the neutralizing antibody and to be more effective against variants. So we're watching this very closely. We don't want to make a decision, quick decision on this before getting more data. The data points are coming in for heterologous vaccinations. Once the technical working group is clear on that, they'll make an advice to the committee that I chair with the health minister, and we will implement heterologous vaccinations. It's possible that we will end up doing this because a lot of countries are doing this to boost the neutralizing antibodies, to boost the efficacy or effectiveness, and also when you are facing vaccine supply constraints, you can mix things up and ensure that you still have the effectiveness of the vaccine is still there.
Okay, great, thanks. So Alifa has lots of questions, but one here about the basis of the 10%, 40% and 60% of the population vaccination coverage targets in your recovery plan. Do those targets take account of the Delta variant?
Well, that's a very, very good question. We're starting to see real life data of the B16172 Delta variant in the UK now. I think Matt Hancock, the health secretary, came up with a statement saying that all new transmission, 90% of the new transmissions are the Delta variant. We have the Delta variant here present, especially in the island of Labuan, which is undergoing a huge surge in cases. So we have to continue to monitor the spread of the Delta variant, and that might have an impact on the vaccination threshold as we move from one phase to another. So that's an ongoing thing. I can't answer that question right now because we are collecting data as we go as far as the transmissibility of the Delta variant. What I'm doing for Labuan is I've declared Labuan a phase 4 state yesterday. So that means that there's no more phase 2, phase 3 Labuan. Labuan, we need to vaccinate, I think, 60,000 people, 60,000 adults. So we're sending enough vaccines to vaccinate every adult in Labuan by the middle of July. And we're sending, although all the vaccines seem to show good efficacy against B16172, Pfizer has good real-life case data against the B16172. So we're sending Pfizer there, and we'll see how that helps Labuan reduce their caseload and reduce transmissibility. It'll be a very, very useful live case for us because Labuan's an island. So essentially it's contained. And if we send Pfizer very quickly there and jab everyone quickly there, we can see how that variant responds to the vaccination drive.
Okay, great. So kind of linked in a way, is there any plan to reduce the time between the first and the second AstraZeneca vaccines?
Yeah, okay, so the expert working group recommended 12 weeks because that's the most efficacious outcome of the AstraZeneca dosing interval. And that's why we went with 12 weeks. We went with 12 weeks based on the science, the data, and also based on the fact that we wanted to jab as many people as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And that's an outcome that you get by spreading out the interval dose. Now, with the presence of the variants, it suggests that you might have to reduce the interval. So for Pfizer, there was a suggestion for us to go to a 6-week interval to give more people the first jab than the 3-week interval. But we decided to abandon that because of the presence of the variant. Now we're thinking of shortening the AZ interval as well. Now, the only problem that I have here is the AZ supply. Part of the AZ supply from COVAX was delayed. Some of the AZ supply from Thailand was slightly delayed. So we're recalculating our delivery schedule right now to see whether or not we can shorten the interval period for AstraZeneca. Emma, you've gone mute.
After 18 months, I should have learned not to do that. Chaco Bodecker, one of our members, has a question about vaccine hesitancy. And he says, could we maybe make some simple videos about the facts about why it's safe and have them in different languages like Malay, Tamil, and Mandarin?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We have a repository of material in the website, which is available in multiple languages, in Bahasa Malaysia, in English, in Tamil, in Chinese, as well as in the native languages of Sabah and Sarawak. But I hear Chaco's suggestion, and I think videos carry a lot more weight than pamphlets. A lot of people want to watch videos these days, easy to spread and share on WhatsApp. So that's a great suggestion. We'll look into that.
Okay, great. And I'm
KJ,
sure
if
there
I
are lots
may.
of actors helping you.
Yeah.
KJ, if I may, I was reading Lim Kok Wing's obituary a few weeks ago, and I didn't realize that he coined things like Malaysia Boleh and Rakan Muda and things like that. And I seem to, growing up, there were a lot of really good jingles on AIDS, on ADs. I'm sure you remember the Dikir Barat songs and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, it really stuck in my mind. It made me as a young child terrified of AIDS and ADs and things like that. We have a struggling entertainment industry at the same time. Why aren't we coming together trying to get a message out to beat vaccine hesitancy? Even Cucuk My Ass, that was a hashtag that someone came up with, and that's like Leo Burnett stuff.
Yeah, I think we are developing a lot of content right now that, like Chako's suggestion, we're holding some of that content till we get to the plateau. Because I think what we want to do is ensure, you see, I mean, it's a tactical thing, if I may share with all of you tonight. We have some content coming up that addresses vaccine hesitancy, but if I release it now, then I'm going to get a barrage of hate mail and criticism saying that, don't talk about vaccine hesitancy, give me my appointment. That's the issue right now. So once I placate those people who have not been given their appointments, then we start with the content that we already have, actually, to address the plateau later. But if I start talking about vaccine hesitancy now, everyone's going to have a field day.
So it's tactical then, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a question from Angel Lam about the advice for pregnant women and breastfeeding women. Do you want to just clarify that? There's been some confusion, I think.
Yeah, so as far as we are concerned, we have issued clinical guidelines on women who are pregnant between 14 weeks to 33 weeks. There's a window there that they can get vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, or after consultation with the AZ with the AZ and the Sinovac vaccine after consultation. And also for breastfeeding mums, we have issued out a clinical guidelines for the vaccine, the choice of vaccines for them to be vaccinated. Now, the issue that we're having right now is that we created a feature in MySejahtera to indicate that you can flag that you are either pregnant between 14 to 33 weeks, or that you are breastfeeding, and you'll be given appointments. Now, some mums or mums-to-be have gone to the vaccination centers, but were turned away by the doctors. So we've overcome this by reviewing and revising the clinical guidelines to give comfort to the doctor who is going to administer the vaccination, that they can do so. And the data right now was that we have 30,000 pregnant mothers registered on MySejahtera. The vaccination centers have been instructed not to turn them away, to vaccinate them after consultation. And hopefully many more, 60,000 pregnant mothers have already registered under MySejahtera. So we'll be pushing out these appointments very, very soon. And the 3 millionth dose administered was to a pregnant mother in Perak, I think a couple of days ago. So we're definitely giving a lot of focus to pregnant ladies as well as breastfeeding mothers.
We have a question from Nadia Wan. Since the pharma companies have indemnified themselves from claims arising from vaccines, will there be legal protection for private sector companies, hospitals, clinics administering the vaccines?
Yeah, so in the private sector model later, where the private sector will purchase and procure vaccines, and then subsequently administer the vaccines to paying customers, then the private sector and the private hospitals will have to work out the liability there. Because in the government's program, because pharmaceutical companies have indemnified themselves, we've created a vaccine injury fund. So, for instance, if there's a causality, if there can be proof of causality that has resulted in constant or long-term hospitalization, then we will make a monetary compensation. If there is death that has a causal link to the vaccine, then we will pay out up to 1 million ringgit. So private hospitals will have to come up with a similar scheme for vaccine injury.
This question, a few people have asked about this. I'd like to also ask about this, about schools and children, and how can we get schools open as quickly as possible? Is it bringing forward when we vaccinate the children, or is it vaccinating the teachers? How are we going to get our schools open as a top priority?
So I've literally, just 5 minutes ago, got a text from the Minister of Education. So he sent me data showing that in examination years in Malaysia, so that's Form 5 and Form 6, I suppose the equivalent in the UK, there are 357,000 students in Form 5 and 47,000 teachers in Form 5. So he's been asking me, can we inoculate this group first and allow the examination years to go back to school gradually. And that makes a lot of sense, because I think kids who are facing public exams really need to get back to school to prepare for the exam. So we're working out something with the Ministry of Education to focus on exam years first, to inoculate both the teachers, the support staff at schools, as well as the exam year students, now that Pfizer has been approved for 12 to 15, as quickly as possible. We might end up using the schools. I mean, the kids showing up on the first day, and there's a vaccination tent there. They go in, they get vaccinated, and off you go.
Yeah, that would be great. We have a question from Richard Small, another one of our members. To help with vaccine hesitancy, at what stage can you reward those who've been vaccinated with permission to travel both interstate and also overseas? I mean, particularly interstate.
Yeah, so that's a public health question. Because you need to achieve a certain, not herd immunity, but rather a certain critical mass of people who've been vaccinated, where in other countries, the data suggests that hospitalizations and deaths drop tremendously. We feel that when 40% of our population has been given 2 doses, we can start moving into a recovery phase. When 60% of our population has been fully vaccinated, 2 dose or 1 dose for Johnson & Johnson and CanSino, then we can start allowing for interstate travel. So right now, if you allow for interstate travel, you may contribute towards another outbreak. And secondly, it's also unfair to those people who have not been vaccinated. But once you hit 60%, of the population fully vaccinated, then that's when public health experts can start advising us, okay, we can start lifting freedoms for certain sectors, opening up certain sectors. So it really depends on the country. Different countries have different real life outcomes as far as their vaccinations are concerned. But for most countries, we've started to see them opening up, loosening up when they've reached about 50 to 60%. But the big caveat here, again, is variants. So you've heard Boris Johnson announcing a delay on the opening up of the UK because of the B16172. So that's, again, a clinical data point that we'll continue to monitor before we decide on opening up.
And will the decision be affected by the different rates of vaccinations in different states as well? Will some states be excluded from the opening up of the borders?
So because of the nature of this virus crossing states and causing this third wave, at the moment we are looking at a nationwide threshold rather than a state threshold. There's no point allowing for certain states to travel to another state when there's possibility of people from another state coming in, because people do travel for work purposes, and that creating a third wave, for instance. So we have to be very certain that it's a national target right now.
Faisal and Jerry, I don't know whether you wanted to ask any more specific questions before we sort of...
Sure.
Yes.
Jerry?
Again, thank you, Faisal. Thanks, Minister. I think for a start, everyone listening will be very appreciative of the huge effort that's being put in by yourself and the collaborating agencies and the frontliners. It is a massive, massive exercise, and everybody's learning as we go. It's very hard to do a SWOT analysis of this kind of thing coolly and plan it all out. I guess what I'm hearing again and again, it's the point that I made earlier, is that vaccination just isn't enough. All the social dimensions you mentioned of social distancing, masks, hand washing, quarantine, movement restrictions, etc., necessary, but we really got to focus on treatment, because the variants are going to come. They're going to not be controlled by some vaccines. Variants on variants on variants. We just don't know which way they're going to go, and we've got to have vaccines that will attack all possible variants of the coronavirus if we're going to be reliant on vaccines, and it's just simply not enough. We have to have treatments, and again, I would just say, as part of a national public health strategy, it'll be really important for Malaysia to have a seat at the bargaining table to get those treatments in really fast as soon as they come out of Pfizer, to have local end stage finishing if that's necessary. But, with a home test kit that Bluetooths a positive to your phone, to a central command center, to the nearest pharmacy to you, food delivery services, any kind of delivery service can have the treatment to you within an hour or two of your home diagnosis. That's really getting in. And it just seems to me that it's such hard work having everything rely on vaccines that it's all we can do right now, but November's not far off.
Yeah.
And to be ready to leap into a rethink of this whole strategy around treatment and home testing so that you can get really early intervention before symptoms express and spreading happens and so on. That seems to be where we should really be focusing. I'd like your thoughts. Yeah, you've already given us your thoughts.
Yeah. I hear you, Professor. I think this is not the end of the war for sure, but I think we need to get this right first, because I think it's very, very important for us to bring down the rates of hospitalizations and death that we know the vaccines do for sure. The vaccines, in terms of the transmissibility of the disease, or the virus rather, that data is still ongoing in real life cases, but we want to bring those numbers down first. But you're right, I don't take away from your suggestion at all that we have to start looking and investing in treatments as well.
Yeah, there are bigger guns coming, basically.
Can I just address, I've seen this question come up a couple of times, which is the coordination between agencies. And I touched on this earlier, but I just wanted to maybe explain to listeners about how the immunization program is run operationally. So as I said earlier, that the policy decisions are made with the health minister as a co-chair in a committee. I run the task force. The task force meets almost on a daily basis. So we have a morning prayer at about 9 o'clock, and we go through the reports of the day. And everyone is represented there. And some people are asking, how do you work with the health ministry? So the joint lead of the task force is the Deputy Director General of Health, Dr. Chong, who handles public health. The other joint lead for the task force is the Deputy Chief of the Army. I'm also supported by Tan Sri Dr. Jamila, the advisor to the Prime Minister in Public Health, my Secretary General, and all the state COVID immunization task force joins for that meeting. So it's a huge meeting. I think it's a big Zoom meeting. So as I said, it's really, really whole of government, and I want to assure the listeners out there that that there is no turf, there is no silo. We're really united in wanting to deliver this for the country.
Actually, can I pick up on that, KG? I mean, here's what I think a lot of people see out there. Mostly is in charge of vaccination, but not the selection of vaccines. You guys hold My Sejahtera data, but not COVID-19 testing data. Again, that goes back to the MOH, right? You were in charge of HIDE before, but lockdown decisions are under the MOD. SOPs are established by MITI and other ministries on and off. And the MOH just recently reported a 200% increase in cases coming from camp tahanan for foreigners, right? We hear what you say about whole of government approach, but a lot of people out there also would challenge that, and they would say things like, this was an emergency government, why is it not coordinated? And I think the question that we're trying to get at is, there have been, folks calling for an NOC or Magaran to concentrate even more. But at the same time, we also hear people saying, look, we want to reconvene parliament and distribute power again, right? So I'm personally very confused. What exactly do Malaysians want? Do we want more concentrated decision making, or do we want it to be more democratic? I'd just like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm not going to speak to the question of a National Emergency Operations Council. I think the way, I want to focus the discussion on vaccinations and immunization. I think there's a very clear cooperation between all the agencies involved. There's very clear lines of reporting for MOH and MOSTI in terms of deciding on procurement, deciding on opening up vaccination centers. The clinical advice and all of that comes from MOH. Other decisions we make together. So I think at the moment, as we get into July and August, what I would like to put out there is I think the less you disrupt the present structure, the better. Because there are clear relationships there that have been built up over the last few months that need to drive this program through. The last thing you need right now is to disrupt this.
Okay. Can I just ask a kind of a follow-up question to one you answered earlier? There are a lot of questions coming in from students concerned about how they get their second jab before they go away to university. So they've had their first, but they need their second quite soon. How do they go about getting that?
I think the email is permohonan. If my guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Permohonan at vaccinecovid.gov.my. We'll put that up on our social media. Gauss, can you confirm that that's the email that we're using? I think we're also having a My Sejahtera feature soon that we'll launch that can indicate that you're a student traveling abroad.
Brilliant. Yeah, because that's sort of quite time essential. All right. So we have...
so I've confirmed it's permohonan at vaccinecovid.gov.my. So it's Papa Echo Romeo Mike Oscar Hotel Oscar November Alpha November permohonan.
Okay, great. We'll also put that at the bottom of this when we publish our this YouTube video. All right, so we've got a lovely question here from, I think it's come on Instagram. What can Malaysians do to be of more help to you and your team?
Well, we're still accepting volunteers, so you can volunteer on the MyVac page. You just fill out a form, and you can volunteer at the vaccination centers. So we're not asking you to become vaccinators, obviously, but a lot of the volunteering that we need for ushers to help the elderly, volunteers at the registration station so that they can, sit down and make sure everyone's got their appointments, everything's updated on the app. I think that would really help out a lot. And I think a lot of NGOs have come and approached me saying that they want to do mobile vaccinations. So please get in touch with your NGOs, whether it's the Red Crescent or St. John's Ambulance, and say that you want to be a volunteer. I'm sure they will accommodate people on a short-term basis who want to be volunteers on their mobile vaccination runs. And we really need the numbers going into July and August, because that's when I want to ramp up vaccinations to more than 300,000 a day. And we need more people at the vaccination centers to help out with the non-medical stuff.
Great, good advice, lots of ideas. So final very quick question. You did PPE like me, and
sorry, I have somebody just texted me saying that we also need people to help on the help desk for all these appointments that have been missed or whatever it is. So again, if you want to help out, then we'll send another email link for people who want to help out with the data stuff. That'll be great.
Yep. So all these people that are complaining they can't get through, volunteer, and then you'll help other people get through, right? Be part of the solution instead of complaining. Yep. So my last quick question was about you did PPE at Oxford like me, and I just wondered whether that prepared you for this challenge, and whether this is the greatest challenge that you've come across so far in your personal and professional life.
I mean, let's put it this way. In Malaysia, no one's ever had this job before, and I pray that no one ever will have this job again. And that's because I don't want there to be another pandemic. I didn't have a manual. I didn't have a predecessor in this job. Of course, I can look at other countries, but things are different in different countries. I had an experience before of running a massive campaign, and that was when Malaysia hosted the Southeast Asia Games. a lot of moving parts, a lot of balls in the air. But that wasn't really life and death. That wasn't life and death at all. This is life and death. So nothing can prepare you for this. Nothing can prepare you for this, because decisions that I have to make and the committee has to make on a daily basis can have an outcome on somebody's life. And what I do to try to be more effective is, on any given day, my team will send me reports at the end of the day. So, we've vaccinated 200,000 people today. These states have done this number. Those are abstract figures. So I spend the end of my days going through my emails and actually help people fix their appointments, people with names, people who've written to me personally, because I can only make effective decisions in the abstract when I know that it means something to somebody with a name. So I spend the last 2 hours of my day from 11 to 1 in the morning going through my emails and looking at individual cases and sitting down with my team virtually, obviously, and saying, guys, can you fix this guy's appointment? He's been sent somewhere miles away from his place, looking at his name, trying to remember his name, so that the abstract figures at the end of the day makes personal sense to me and drives home the point that I'm dealing with lives of people in Malaysia.
KJ,
Minister, I think we all appreciate just how incredibly challenging this is. And I think you've been very honest with us in revealing the challenges and your personal commitment. And we'd certainly like to express our appreciation to you for sharing this time. And hopefully you can share this, the recording of this conversation widely, because I think there's a level of detail and mastery of detail and understanding of the blockages and challenges that's very real and will help the public understand more what's going on. We greatly appreciate your time and insights here. Thank you.
Yeah, on that point, KJ, I've been getting some messages on my phone. A lot of people are saying, you look like you need some sleep. So, whatever it is, it's very easy to criticize a man in the arena. And we greatly appreciate your efforts. Thank you for your national service. We understand the Prime Minister has taken away everyone's pay as well, so you're doing this for free. And I think we are all rooting for you. If anything, is because our lives depend on it. So, thank you very much for your service, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure your team have been reading the comments in the chat. There are a lot of very positive comments and people very thankful. And it is an incredible thing that your team is doing, and it is very, very challenging. And I think people just need to remember that sometimes, how hard it is and how well you're doing. So to wrap up, thank you very much to Sean and Melissa for all the tech support, and Melissa, also your questions. Thank you to Sharifa for helping to fix up this interview for us and for all of the incredible logistical support she's given us. Thank you to Dr. Jerry and Faisal for moderating so smoothly. Thank you to our members and our guests for your brilliant questions. I think actually looking at them, many of them have been covered in one form or another. Nearly all of them have. And then finally, thank you so much to YB Khairy Jamaluddin for joining us this evening, and really for giving us such detailed information. I mean, unprecedented level of sharing and facts, and some of in our private chats amongst us, just the mastery of your brief is incredibly impressive, and we've really valued the information and the facts that you've given us. So we really appreciate that. I'm sure everyone agrees when I say we sincerely wish you good luck with your mission. We would love to have you back to talk upon some reflection of this when we're all back to normal, and hopefully things have all been sorted out. So thank you once again for joining us. It's been extremely insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and stay safe. Good night.
Okay, good night, everyone.